Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zheng here, and today I'm bringing you another match analysis from Oregon Regionals. I uploaded one yesterday in my top 8 set against Nikolai Zelensky, the 2014 Seniors World Champion, and today I'm doing an analysis of my top 4 set against 2013 Seniors World Champion Hayden McTavish. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, please share your support by leaving a like in the video and of course giving me any feedback. Go check out the top 8 analysis if you have not already, and there's going to be plenty more of these in the near future. So yeah, I definitely want to do this a little bit more and maybe even do analyses of games that I haven't played in. But of course, this was the top 4 of the Oregon Regional Championships where I played Hayden McTavish. Hayden and I actually played in the first day, so I had some pretty good sense of what his whole team kind of had going into this game. So we're going to get into this one. You see Hayden's team up there: Mandibuzz, Snorlax, Tapu Fini, Marowak, Garchomp, and Kartana. Of course, you see my 6 on the right side. So yesterday when I played, or the day before top 8 when I played Hayden, I led Drifblim Lele both games, and it seemed to work out pretty well. So going into this game, I felt like that strategy was still pretty consistent. In the back, I had Garchomp and Kartana, mainly because Metagross kind of gets wrecked by the Garchomp and the Marowak on Hayden's end. The Mandibuzz can also foul play it, and the Arcanine, even though it's really good against Kartana, really suffers against everything else, like the Garchomp, like that Tapu Fini, and like that Marowak. So I go with Drifblim Lele thinking, okay, this is probably a pretty solid lead. Hayden hasn't shown much that he can use to beat it, but Hayden actually goes with a really clever lead of Snorlax and Tapu Fini. So this lead is really clever because of a bunch of reasons. One, I lose the Terrain War, and 2, it effectively renders my Drifblim 100% useless. Drifblim is really good against Pokemon like, you know, that Mandibuzz, which I can match Tailwind, that Kartana, which I can use Shadow Ball or Will-O-Wisp against, and that Garchomp, and even the Marowak. But these two in combination give Drifblim a lot of trouble. So immediately I'm thinking, wow, that was a really smart lead by Hayden, and I need to figure out a way to get out of this. So the obvious play really is for me to get Kartana in, but Hayden can obviously capitalize, I thought. But I still figured Drifblim does absolutely nothing here, so I need to try to get Kartana into a position where it can at least pull something off. So I bring in Kartana and I actually go for the taunt onto Tapu Fini, because Hayden's Fini yesterday, or I had seen already, was Calm Mind and Substitute, and then Muddy Water Moonblast. And I figured Hayden might try to go for a Calm Mind since that's what he was going the last time we played. So he actually does go for the Calm Mind, and Snorlax goes for the Facade onto Tapu Lele, which does actually under 50%. So things are looking a lot better than the last turn, but Drifblim already wasted its seed, so I know that even if, you know, I claw myself out of this one, Drifblim in the back is still kind of dead weight. So this next turn I decide that Snorlax is going to be a problem, and I figure Tapu Fini might consider switching out. I think here Hayden might expect my Kartana to detect, so he, I think, would want to double up onto that Lele. So I just go for the Sacred Sword, trying to get some damage off and proccing the Snorlax Berry, which indeed happens. And I go for the Moonblast onto the Tapu Fini, expecting a switch out. It ends up not switching out. I do get a special attack drop, but I am a little bit concerned because Hayden could double up onto my Kartana right now. He doesn't end up doing that. Indeed does go for the double up onto Lele, which I was expecting, and picks up a knockout. But, you know, I'm not sure if things are really that great for me because I lost my Tapu Lele, and if Hayden has that Mandibuzz in the back, then I'm in some trouble. So basically this game, like, even though the last couple of turns have played out okay, the lead matchup was just really, really bad for me, and I'm already kind of thinking about how I can adjust going into the next couple of games. But I know the game's still not over, and obviously I'm not going to give up. So I end up bringing Drifblim in here to pressure with some Tailwind. I can also, you know, do some damage with Shadow Ball. But Snorlax, you know, I procced its Berry, but Sacred Sword does around half or so, and Snorlax can kind of just recycle up. I did have Garchomp in the back, so I'm thinking maybe bringing Garchomp actually would have been a smarter call instead of bringing Drifblim out, but I wanted to at least get some Tailwind pressure going on into this next turn. So now I have Drifblim and Kartana out. I know Tapu Fini can't protect here, and I know Snorlax doesn't have its Berry, but I get a little bit too greedy here. I was really worried about the Tapu Fini, so I decided to just go for a Leaf Blade into that slot, hoping that Hayden would stay in and I could pick up a knockout. In fact, that's not the case, though. I get the Tailwind up, but Tailwind doesn't really matter too much since my Pokemon are faster anyway. And Snorlax makes a great play here, going for the Recycle, getting the Berry back. So I'm in quite a bad position at this point. Even though I was able to burn the Berry last turn, I effectively wasted a turn of Sacred Sword there onto the Snorlax. So Snorlax is able to recover its Berry, Mandibuzz is able to come in for relatively free, and now Kartana is threatened immensely by foul play from Mandibuzz and even high horsepowers from Snorlax. So I don't really like my positioning too much, especially because Drifblim doesn't have that special defense boost either. This next turn I decide, okay, I'm going to at least try to burn the Mandibuzz to, you know, get some residual damage going and to put it kind of on a timer. Of course, a long timer, but still a timer. And Hayden, fortunately, does double up into my Kartana, so that ends up working out pretty well. But, you know, even though I got, I'd say, the better turn out of it. You know, what better position am I really in? Drifloon is still rendered relatively useless, as the stream kind of lagged there for a second. But, and Snorlax still has its berry, so that there's, like, so much that's bad right now. Like, I brought Drifloon into this matchup because it, you know, provides Tailwind pressure, and if I don't bring Drifloon and Mandibuzz gets Tailwind up, then I'm in a lot of trouble. So I felt like I kind of was forced to bring it, but Mandibuzz has the matchup against Drifloon, and you can see how useless Drifloon is right now. So I decided that I finally should switch out here to get some pressure on with Garchomp, because at least Garchomp can deal more damage than Drifloon can. It's Smart Strike against the Mandibuzz, and you see how well Mandibuzz takes that. Like, Mandibuzz is really, really bulky, and it reveals Snarl as well, and that actually does a decent amount to the Kartana because Kartana's special defense that is so low, and I have no bulk. And Snorlax actually goes for a Curse, which I think is a really clever play as well. At this point, I really have nothing to hit this Snorlax other than Sacred Sword, but it still has its berry. Of course, Garchomp can proc its berry potentially with the Tectonic Rage, but Mandibuzz right now is still kind of sitting comfortably. It can Roost away, it can Foul Play away, it can really just put on pressure everywhere. So, at this point, I'm trying to think, like, is there any way I can really win this one? Because I can't even do that much damage. And I'm thinking maybe my one out here is getting a, you know, a boost with Kartana. I get a little bit greedy here because I'm really scared of Mandibuzz, and I figure, okay, if I Smart Strike it and Fire Fang it, that should be a KO. And Hayden capitalizes off that perfectly. Instead, I could have just Tectonic Rage and gone for a Sacred Sword onto Snorlax, but I really, really didn't want Mandibuzz getting a Roost off. Instead, Hayden makes a brilliant switch. Feeny comes in and actually has the berry, so it's able to take my Smart Strike and even heal back. And Snorlax goes for a Facade onto my Garchomp, which actually I remember it doing more than I expected. Of course, it was at +1, so I should have expected to do over 50%, but I committed into the Mandibuzz thinking, okay, even if I commit into it and something switches in, you know, Snorlax shouldn't be able to do too much. But in fact, you know, it's a 2-hit KO onto Garchomp at this point with Facade, and that's really bad for me. So now I'm, you know, definitely getting a little bit worried, and at the same time, I still know that there is that Mandibuzz in the back, and I'm still thinking, okay, I might have to try to get a boost up here with Kartana. So I actually end up switching out Garchomp, expecting Feeny to switch out, which might have been a questionable play. Feeny does actually end up switching out, but it goes into Marowak. So I think I had a really free opportunity here to go for a Tectonic Rage onto the Tapu Fini and a Sacred Sword. In fact, in the end, I don't end up doing that. But because Marowak switches in, I'm actually not in the worst of positions. I do switch into my Drifloon, and now I can Shadow Ball the Marowak and Sacred Sword Snorlax, as Kartana is still sitting relatively healthy. But looking back, you know, maybe I should have capitalized off a little bit harder and just gone for a Tectonic Rage onto Feeny and a Smart Strike, knowing that he couldn't protect there. So Drifloon comes out, and, you know, Drifloon, I guess, provides a little bit more utility against Marowak, but it's absolutely useless against the rest of Hayden's team. So if there's any time for Hayden, or for Drifloon to be out, I guess it's right now. So this next turn, I know I can't really touch Snorlax with Drifloon at all, so I just go for the Sacred Sword Shadow Ball play, because that's by far my safest play. But because Snorlax has Recycle, it's able to just heal all the way back up, and Shadow Ball goes into the Protect. And Snorlax does go for the Facade onto Kartana, which after the +1 boost does a decent amount. So now I'm thinking maybe I'm not in the worst of positions, because I can just Sacred Sword Snorlax again, which might knock out. I don't know exactly at this point. And Shadow Ball into Marowak should pick up a knockout or do a lot of damage into the Feeny, or get some chip damage off into the Mandibuzz. So since I can't do anything else with Drifloon, I figure that's probably my best play, and I do go for that. I'm just going to Shadow Ball Marowak and Sacred Sword. And Snorlax went for the Facade last turn, so I was like, oh, at this point I don't think I actually saw the 4th move, so I didn't know whether there was high horsepower or not. So Mandibuzz comes in, I'm okay with that. You know, I get a chance to decrease its special defense, and I go for the Sacred Sword, but Snorlax hangs on with 12 HP. I think if I actually picked up that knockout, I would have been able to bring the game back into my favor, but not only do I miss out on the knockout, but he also reveals high horsepower, and that knocks out my Kartana cleanly, and that effectively cleans up the game for me there. Or, you know, Hayden's pretty much won the game at this point. There's absolutely nothing I can do to touch Mandibuzz. You know, my attacking moves with Garchomp and with Drifloon are Fire Fang and Shadow Ball. Earthquake obviously can't touch Mandibuzz, and I can't touch Snorlax with my Drifloon, so I have to Earthquake this turn to knock it out. But that means Mandibuzz gets a Roost off, and Mandibuzz can kind of just stall out this game. So basically, it really came down to that last turn. I had no options with Drifloon, but if Sacred Sword could have knocked out Snorlax, then I think Kartana actually had a prime opportunity to sweep this game with Drifloon on its side. Unfortunately, not the case, and Snorlax is clutch for Hayden and is able to survive. So I got the Earthquake off, but at this point I'm pretty sure the game is lost because Mandibuzz can just roost up, and Shadow Ball doesn't do nearly enough damage, and Mandibuzz can just snarl and roost and foul play away. I actually go for the Tailwind because I know Mandibuzz could potentially go for a Tailwind, so if it does, I need to at least match it. But Hayden makes the most consistent play, which is just going for the Roost, which I think is the better play. Could have Shadow Balled there, maybe hoping for a critical hit, I guess, but I needed to cover the option of him Tailwinding. And at this point, I know there's really not very much I can do because I just can't knock out this Mandibuzz. So going into games 2 and 3, I'm thinking already, okay, I need better answers against Mandibuzz. One of the biggest reasons why I struggled in the late game against it is because I lost my Tapu Lele, like literally turn 2 of the game, and I also let Kartana go down, and those two are by far the better hitting members of the team against this Mandibuzz. I'm thinking maybe I want to bring Metagross and Arcanine. I feel like Pokemon choice-wise, it wasn't too bad, but this game came down to a bunch of things. Me leading really poorly relative to Hayden's lead, Hayden making 2 brilliant switch outs, both times baiting targets, the time when I Smart Strike and Fire Fighting the Mandibuzz and Tapu Fini came in, and then the turn where I Leaf Bladed the Tapu Fini and I switched out Garchomp into Drifblim. So I would say like those were 2 really key mistakes that I missed out on in addition to the lead. And in the end, it still came down to, if Kartana knocks out the Snorlax, of course, because Sacred Sword ignores the defense increase from Curse, but I'm still fine. So this next time I decide to protect Garchomp, I'm like, okay, I'll just go for the Shadow Ball into Tapu Fini, trying to bring it into Earthquake KO range, because I still have my Z move, and I want to at least save it for the Marowak. Like, maybe I can win this game off a billion flinches from Fire Fang and some special defense drops on Drifloon. So this turn plays out well at least, because he Moonblasts into Garchomp and just roosts. So now I know, okay, I can just Earthquake. The Marowak is going to get knocked out if it switches in, but Fini here most likely is just going to take the sacrifice, and I should be able to take a foul play. So I'm not technically out of it yet, but it's just like damaging this Mandibuzz is a real concern because, Roost heals back so much damage. And so I'm thinking maybe my win condition at this point is force a 2v1 situation where Mandibuzz can Roost, but I can deal around equally amount of the same damage. And if you're Roosting, that means you can't go for Foul Play or Snarl. That's a big deal as well. So that's what I'm playing for at this point. So I do go for the Earthquake onto the Tapu Fini to get the clean knockout, and I know that this Mandibuzz shouldn't be able to, knock me out in return. Shadow Ball is actually doing an okay amount of damage, and I'm hoping, if I can get a special defense drop or two, that could really change this drastically. But once I see that foul play damage, I'm a little bit discouraged because another foul play will just be able to knock me out cleanly. So this is my last turn of Tailwind. If you guys remember, I did set up Tailwind a little bit earlier, and Marowak comes in. So at this point, I, can go for 2 plays. I can go for the Tectonic Rage onto Marowak, hoping for a critical hit or hoping Hayden just protects it. Hoping Hayden doesn't protect it. Or I could Fire Fang Shadow Ball on the Mandibuzz, hoping for a flinch. And at this point, I probably should have Fire Fanged Mandibuzz. There's very little reason for Hayden to not protect the Marowak here. Hayden can just Tailwind and protect, and that instantly loses me the game. If I don't get that crit there on Marowak, or if I don't flinch Mandibuzz. So I ended up going for the Tectonic Rage, but I kind of blanked out there. I just kind of forgot about the fact that you could flinch with Fire Fang, and so I should have gone for the Fire Fang Shadow Ball double target onto the Mandibuzz, because at this point in the game, I'm already really behind, right? And so I really need to figure out a way to win this one, and by Tectonic Raging into Protect, if I get a critical hit here, I guess maybe, but still, like, Tailwind will go up. Whereas in the contrast, if I can deny Tailwind with a flinch, then I'm actually, maybe not in the worst of positions, but still, like, Mandibuzz is difficult to deal with. So Tailwind does go up. I end up going for the Destiny Bond because I figure, okay, if he Tailwinds, then I can at least get a knockout next turn if he Shadow Bones into my Drifblim. But in retrospect, like, that doesn't make much sense because I wasted my Z move onto Marowak. If I'm expecting Tailwind to go up, why not just Fire Fang Mandibuzz? So I didn't really think about the end game here too well. Not that my chances were too great to begin with, but at least that would have given me a better opportunity. And now with Tailwind up, Marowak most definitely can just knock out Drifblim with a Shadow Bone, as it will be able to outspeed me. And Mandibuzz here, can just foul play. So I go for the Protect onto Garchomp, just maybe trying to stall Tailwind out. Foul play is going to go into that, but Shadow Bone comes out from Marowak, and that's going to target Drifblim for a clean one-hit KO. Drifblim, pretty decent bulk because of its HP stat, but it's not that invested, especially because most Drifblims tend to opt for a lot of special attack and speed investment. Now with Mandibuzz versus Garchomp, there's obviously very little I can do. So Mandibuzz will go for the foul play, and we'll pick up the clean knockout onto Garchomp, and Hayden McTavish ends up winning the first game in our best of 3. So in reflecting, as I was playing that game, I was already thinking a lot about what I could do better because, the lead matchup was just so poor for me. And then a couple of mistakes I think I made. One, like I mentioned earlier, I was just doubling into slots and Hayden was making really good switches. He was basically baiting my attacks really well, and I wasn't using the fact like he doesn't have Protect on a lot of these Mons well enough. For example, Tapu Fini's moveset was Calm Mind, Substitute, Moonblast, and Muddy Water. Amanda Buzz didn't have Protect, Snorlax didn't have Protect, so those were 3 Pokemon that Hayden brought that didn't have Protect, and Kartana does neutral or super effective damage to all of the Pokemon bar the Marowak. So I was like, okay, I need to play a little bit better with Kartana. I need to conserve my Tapu Lele a little bit better because Mandibuzz was able to just run over me that last game. And I need to kind of cover the last lead option a little bit better. Last game, Hayden went with the Snorlax and the Tapu Fini, and if I just led Kartana immediately, I put on so much more offensive pressure. One thing that I had to note, though, was that Leaf Blade onto Tapu Fini actually might not have been a knockout, because when we played the previous day, he was able to survive a Leaf Blade with Tapu Fini at full HP and heal back with the berry. So that's something I had to keep in mind as well, since his Tapu Fini looked very, very bulky and a little bit less offensive. So going into game 2, I'm like, okay, I need to cover the lead option from the last game, so let's go with Kartana and Tapu Lele, because Tapu Lele still puts on a lot of offensive pressure and covers that Mandibuzz, and meanwhile my Kartana covers Snorlax, it covers Tapu Fini, and it covers the Kartana on Hayden's end. So I figure maybe this is a little bit better of an option. In the back, I still brought Drifloon because I figured I needed to have a way to match Tailwind if Hayden went for it, and Garchomp is the 4th, just because Garchomp's really good against Hayden's entire team, bar the Mandibuzz. So Hayden switches things up completely as well, and I'm a little bit concerned here. Because if I just led Drifloon and Lele against this lead matchup, I'm in a pretty good position, but instead I went with Kartana and Lele, and, you know, Kartana here can Sacred Sword Kartana on Hayden's end, but Foul Play from Mandibuzz will do so much damage to my own Kartana. Tapu Lele is immediately threatened by Hayden's Kartana, and in yesterday's game I actually saw that it was Z move, Gracium Z. So here, I know he doesn't have Smart Strike, so his only way of actually knocking out Lele is with Gracium Z. So I figure he's going to make a safe play of going for the Z move onto Lele and Tailwinding, so I can actually bring in Drifloon, get that Unburden going, and go for a Sacred Sword onto the Kartana. So that's exactly what I go for, and Hayden does go for the Bloom Doom, and that's still going to do a ton of damage to my Drifloon, but, you know, better that than to either A, stay in and still take some residual damage, or B, stay in, you know, and not protect and get knocked out. So yeah, that still does around 80% or so to Drifloon, which is not good. My Kartana will go for a Sacred Sword onto Hayden's, but he will be able to hang on with a sliver of HP, and unfortunately Mandibuzz does set up Tailwind. So I think that was definitely by far Hayden's safest play, and it still puts him significantly higher than the position I'm in. So this next one I'm thinking, okay, Kartana probably wants to target down that Drifloon to get a Beast Boost, so one thing I can do is actually switch Drifloon out into Garchomp, because I do have that rough skin, and hopefully Kartana will faint. At this point, I didn't know exactly how much HP Kartana on Hayden's end had, so that's kind of what I was going for, baiting an attack onto Drifloon, bringing in Garchomp, having Kartana faint from the rough skin, and then my Kartana getting some free damage off. Although I do decide to protect here in case of a potential double target, and just to avoid foul play damage. So Drifloon switches out, and Kartana goes for the Protect, and I'm thinking, okay, please just target down the Drifloon slot. Hayden does Leaf Blade. I'm like, oh, that's great. Like, that's exactly what I was going for. But then Kartana actually hangs on with 4 HP, and Foul Play goes into my Kartana slot. And at this point, I'm thinking, oh boy, like, I've probably lost this game. There's still 2 more turns of Tailwind up. Kartana's still sitting healthy. Mandibuzz can Foul Play either of these Pokemon. Like, what do I even do at this point? Like, I just really dig myself into quite the hole here. So I'm a little bit concerned because there's really not much I feel like I can do, but I tell myself, okay, I really, 1, need to stall out Tailwind, and 2, if Hayden has Snorlax and Tapu Fini in the back, maybe I'm not out of this one. But I need to preserve my Kartana because Kartana is by far the most important member here. So what I do this next turn is I actually switch out Kartana back out into Drifloon, because Drifloon at this point is relatively useless already. So I'm actually just going to go for the Sacrifice onto it. And Hayden ends up Leaf Blading Garchomp, which I'm actually really happy about, because instead of going for a Foul Play into Garchomp and maybe a Sacred Sword, he ends up knocking himself out from that rough skin, which what I was hoping for a turn earlier, and Drifloon faints here. So, you know, there's 1 more turn of Tailwind up, and I've got 2 really offensive Pokemon in Lele and Kartana in the back. In the last game, my biggest issue was that I lost Lele and Kartana really early on. This game, I decide to conserve them a little bit better, so I do have them in the back, but, you know, I don't know what Hayden's last one is. If it's that Marowak, then I pretty much instantly lose. Even Garchomp gives me a lot of trouble. So I'm praying, you know, that it's Snorlax and Tapu Fini there. We've already seen 1. And you know, we haven't seen either yet, no, so at this point I'm hoping it's both of those, because if it's any other combination, I'm pretty much screwed. And Hayden actually brings in Snorlax, which I was 100% shocked by, because Snorlax under Tailwind is still slower than pretty much everything. And so I'm thinking, wow, this is exactly the window of opportunity I needed to get back into this game, because Snorlax effectively wastes a turn of Tailwind here, and he really can't double up for a knockout here either, so suddenly I'm back into this one. And I decide this next turn that I actually want to conserve my efforts onto the Snorlax, because Snorlax could switch out, like maybe he's, you know, like I wasn't really sure why Snorlax came in here, but I figured, okay, I need to capitalize off it and do a ton of damage onto that slot immediately, and then I can focus my efforts onto Mandibuzz the next turn since I'm faster anyway. Mandibuzz goes for a Snarl, and I actually kind of forgot about that. I could have maybe double protected here, because that special attack drop is, you know, pretty crucial. So I get the Sacred Sword off against Snorlax. It does a ton of damage, of course, proccing its berry, and that's kind of what I was going for. Basically, what I was saying is, okay, if I double open a Snorlax this turn and it stays in, then the next turn it will be in Sacred Sword KO range, unless it goes for a Recycle. Fortunately enough, no Recycle comes out. A Recycle actually could have been really bad there for me, but Hayden, of course, knows that I have Taunt, so maybe he was expecting a Taunt. Although he does end up going for a Curse instead. So that Curse also effectively wastes a turn from Snorlax. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, I probably should have lost this one, but now I have a window of opportunity to win this match. And because, you know, even though Snorlax is cursed up, it can't knock out either of my Pokemon, even at +1 with the Facade or High Horsepower. And even though I'm at -1 special attack, Mandibuzz didn't get the, you know, the special defense increase. So I can still just Moonblast and Smart Strike, and that should be a knockout onto Mandibuzz. And nothing can switch into that cleanly in the back either. And he stays in with Mandibuzz, so I'm thinking, okay, this is really good. Smart Strike does do a decent amount. I'm at -1, but I am still Life Orb, Tapu Lele, and Moonblast does pick up the knockout. In the game that we played yesterday, Moonblast did around that much, a little bit more actually, when he was at +1 special defense, and I managed to hang on from Facade with just a sliver of HP. So I'm thinking, wow, okay, this is good, but I still don't know what Hayden's last one is. And he brings in Tapu Fini, and I'm like, oh my goodness, can I actually win this game? Like, it's actually totally doable now, because Cortana can just one-shot Snorlax in this range, and I can knock out Tapu Fini at +1 with a Leaf Blade as well. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, like, maybe I'm actually still in this one. It still comes down to, you know, how much damage can Fini get an accuracy drop on Cortana with the Muddy Water, or can he get a critical hit here? Because my safe play is to just go for the Sacred Sword here onto Snorlax to knock it out. I end up going for a Moonblast on the Fini, but I'm thinking in retrospect, maybe Taunting would have been better just to prevent a sub and to make Muddy Water spread damage still. Because, yeah, so I do pick up the knockout here with the Sacred Sword. I do get the Beast Boost, which means +1 Leaf Blade should guarantee a knockout. I think, in retrospect, Taunting might have been a little bit better instead of going for the Moonblast, because I actually faint from my Life Orb, and so Hayden gets a single target Muddy Water off here against my Cortana. At this point, I'm worried that would even knock me out, but fortunately, Cortana manages to hang on and no accuracy drop. So I actually managed to steal this one away, and I can just Leaf Blade Fini for the win now. But I'm thinking to myself, boy, like, I didn't deserve to win this one. You know, I made a really bad play by switching in Garchomp, thinking Cortana would faint from the Rough Skin, and ended up not fainting. The only reason I kind of won this one was because Hayden, 1, brought in Snorlax under Tailwind instead of bringing Tapu Fini, and 2, opted not to bring the Garchomp or the Marowak on his end. So I'm thinking, I stole that game away. If I want to win this set, and if I want to win this third game, I really have to figure something else a little bit better, or just play a little bit better. And to me, I think a lot of it came down to the lead matchup in the end. Game 1 and Game 2, I felt like I had the, like for example, I thought Hayden led better than me both games. Like, Game 1, I put myself in such a hole immediately because Drifloon was wasted. Game 2, I brought in Drifloon, but I wasn't able to set up Tailwind. And so Game 3, I make a gut decision to go with Drifloon Lele as my lead. I think to myself, okay, he saw me lead Cortana that last game. He can't possibly risk leading Snorlax and Tapu Fini again. And that's the only lead matchup that really gives Lele Drifloon problems. If he leads with any other combination of Pokemon, even that Mandibuzz, then I like my position significantly more. And even though it's tempting to bring Metagross and Arcanine, like, I'm thinking, okay, last game Hayden didn't bring that Garchomp, he didn't bring that Marowak. If there's any adjustment he would probably be bringing one of those two. And both of those give my Metagross and Arcanine significant trouble. And I'm thinking, like, it's tempting to bring Metagross because Choice Band attacks against that, or against anything, is really good, especially against Mandibuzz. And even Flare Blitzes from Arcanine do a good amount to the Mandibuzz, and Mandibuzz is just one of my main concerns, like setting up the late game for it. But we're going to get into Game 3, and like I said, I go with the gut decision to lead Drifloon and Lele, and I'm saying if Snorlax Fini comes out, like, I might just insta-lose. But he leads with Mandibuzz and Snorlax, and I'm like, thank goodness, because that is a significantly better lead matchup than anything. This is, like, really ideal for me, actually, because he doesn't put on any offensive pressure this turn 1. I can go for a Will-O-Wisp, although that's actually not the best of ideas when Snorlax has Facade. But the main thing here is I can get a free Tailwind and a Moonblast off here. There's little reason not to do that. Like, Drifloon can Tailwind, even if Mandibuzz Tailwinds, you know, I have the speed advantage here because Hayden has slower Pokemon like Snorlax, like that Tapu Fini, like that Marowak. And Moonblast, if Mandibuzz doesn't, or if Snorlax doesn't switch on into Tapu Fini, Moonblast just one-shots Mandibuzz. So, Hayden's best play here is pretty much to switch Snorlax out into Tapu Fini, but instead he actually switches out Mandibuzz into Tapu Fini. Something I wasn't expecting. I think that was actually a really clever play in retrospect. At first I thought, oh, you know, it just makes a ton of sense to switch your Snorlax out. But the thing is, if you do that and you set up Tailwind, like I just match Tailwind and get a Moonblast off against Mandibuzz, and then I can just knock out Mandibuzz the next turn. So Moonblast there still does over 50% to the Fini, and actually gets a special attack drop, which is kind of nice. Facade there, even after Life Orb, still doesn't bring me down under 50%. So I've got Tailwind going on now, and I have Fini, which I know is at -1 special attack, so it can't do too much damage. So definitely like my position a lot more than I did in the previous games. You know, I finally had a better lead matchup, and turn 1 played out pretty well. This next turn I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of like game 1, where if I bring in Kartana, you know, it's in a really good position. And because Fini has that special attack drop, I think Kartana is, like, perfectly safe to bring in because even a double target shouldn't knock it out. So that's exactly what I do. Drifloon does absolutely nothing against this combination, so I need to make use of my Tailwind turns and put on some more offensive pressure. I bring in Kartana and just go for the Moonblast onto the Fini slot because I know Snorlax, even after Facade, probably shouldn't knock me out. I don't know the exact damage calcs, but if it's anything based off like that last turn, then I should be able to hang on with just a little bit of HP, and that's exactly the case. So I get one more big hit in me, I eliminate that Tapu Fini, which is always helpful, and I like my position here because I still have a couple of turns of Tailwind left. But at this point, I'm reminding myself, okay, don't forget how much trouble a Mandibuzz can give you, especially if you don't have Tapu Lele. So my goal at this point is to conserve the Tapu Lele so that I can use it to Moonblast Mandibuzz in the future. So Hayden reveals his 4th here. He brings in Kartana, so he didn't bring that Marowak or that Garchomp in this game, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty good because yeah, you know, in this game, perhaps like it would have been fine because I did have that Garchomp conserved in the back, but still, like, I'd rather face against Kartana since I know it's so frail. So, at this point in the game, I know, okay, Tapu Lele has one more shot in it, Tailwind is still up, and his Kartana has Substitute. And I really don't want to allow it to get a Substitute off. Like, one play I was considering here was just double protecting. Although I guess in retrospect that doesn't make much sense, but the double protect would be to scout out for a protect on Hayden's end on Kartana. But instead I'm like, okay, I'm just going to play it safe here. I'm just going to go for the Smart Strike onto the Kartana. If he protects, that's fine. I can double up into that slot next turn. If he goes for anything else, a Sacred Sword or a Substitute, that puts me in such a good position. Mandibuzz does get the special defense increase here as it switches in, but Kartana doesn't detect. I do get that Sacred Sword off, and it goes for the Substitute. So that's exactly what I was thinking of. I think at that point, Hayden had 2 plays. He had the opportunity to protect Kartana and stall out a turn at Tailwind, but if he does that, then I can double up into that slot next turn, and I think that was too risky. So Hayden tries to, you know, gamble a little bit, hoping that I target into Snorlax or hoping I don't target Kartana. Ends up being the case. I do target Kartana to cover the Substitute option, and now I'm thinking, okay, this is pretty good because I still have one more turn in Tailwind, and Kartana is relatively low. But one of my concerns is that Hayden might be able to set up a Tailwind now, and Kartana can just safely detect. So I figure Kartana's going to detect here. He actually ends up switching out, which I was really surprised by, into Snorlax, because I thought detect and Tailwind was by far the best play. So I ended up just Smart Striking and Shadow Ball to get some damage off. I actually meant to Will-O-Wisp, but I ran out of time and it ended up choosing Shadow Ball there. But Mandibuzz actually doesn't go for the Tailwind either, which I was surprised by. So I think instead of switching out into Snorlax, Hayden had a pretty prime opportunity to Tailwind and Protect. And then at least, you know, there would have been some 50-50 mind games with who does Kartana target at this point. You know, who does he double up into, basically. Although I know that the Kartana's moveset didn't allow it to really hit Drifloon, so because I had got that Sacred Sword off previously, even if he got Tailwind off, Drifloon could kind of just Shadow Ball into that slot. But now with Snorlax coming back in, I'm like, okay, you know, even if he sets up Tailwind, like, what's that really going to do for him? I can even match a Tailwind now, and I can still put on some pressure with Kartana. Kartana is by far the most important member, and for that reason, I actually decided to switch out into Garchomp. And go for the Will-O-Wisp onto the Mandibuzz. I switch out into Garchomp here because I don't want to lose Kartana quite yet because it is able to beat everything on my opponent's team, but it has to be able to chip or finish things off, right? Like, right now, the Snorlax is still at full HP, so if I just Sacred Sword that slot, that's just going to proc its berry, and that's just wasting a turn there with Kartana. So, by bringing in Garchomp, what I'm thinking at this point is, okay, I can actually Tech Rage the Snorlax, and because he has that defense boost from that curse that he just went for, I hopefully won't proc its berry. And then if I don't proc its berry, Snorlax can't recycle and it will be in KO range from Sacred Sword. So that's basically the setup that I put myself into. Now, it's still kind of risky because at this point Hayden can predict my switch outs, and at this point I'm thinking, okay, Drifloon's absolutely useless. I think it's time to switch that back out into Kartana. And one way Hayden can capitalize off that is if he goes for a Snarl and a high horsepower into the Drifloon slot. Relatively risky play, but also there's not much Drifloon can do. So this was a huge risk that I took here, but I figured I had to go for it because otherwise I'd be rendered absolutely useless. I also could have maybe Swords Dance here with Garchomp instead of Tech Raging, but my mindset was, okay, Tech Rage into the Garchomp and, you know, bring Snorlax down just above 50% and then finish it off with the Sacred Sword. But what I didn't consider was if Snorlax targets my Garchomp slot and it, you know, Rough Skin activates and then he's able to heal back. Instead, Foul Play goes into the Garchomp slot, which I'm like, okay, already that's good because that means Kartana should survive this turn, and Curse comes out. So that was literally the best case scenario because, you know, a Snarl and a high horsepower into the Kartana slot might have just knocked me out. If Garchomp, or if Snorlax targeted down Garchomp with a Facade, then it would have been able to hang on. But after this turn, I'm like, okay, I think I've got this game locked up because I can just go safely for the Sacred Sword onto Snorlax. A Garchomp gets a relatively free Swords Dance up as well. So that last turn really pretty much sealed things up for me. Even if he switches out here, that's even better for me because Kartana's it's a bigger concern just because it's faster. So Snorlax, you know, got 2 curses off, but not really too much success in that in the last couple of turns because it wasn't able to really utilize those turns. So I do pick up the knockout there, and I go for the SD on Garchomp at this point because, you know, I'm not doing any damage otherwise. So if I get a couple of boosts off, at least maybe Fire Fang will do more to the Mandibuzz. So Foul Play still does a ton of damage there to Kartana, but given that Snorlax doesn't have Protect, you know, I know the game is locked up at this point. I think if anything, Hayden maybe should have sacked the Snorlax earlier so that Kartana could come back in and at least put on some pressure with Speed Ties or whatnot. But now with Snorlax so low, or in Sacred Sword KO range, with neither of these Pokemon being able to protect, I know I've got the game locked up, especially with the Tapu Lele in the back. So Sacred Sword comes out, picks up the knockout there onto Snorlax, and I can just Fire Fang to knock out the Mandibuzz now. So, or not knock out the Mandibuzz, but, you know, I get the flinch there, so that's actually what I should have gone for the last game. But, you know, now it's a 4-1 lead, and I should be able to pretty much close out this game. But, you know, looking back, I think that this was a set that I don't think I played exceptionally well in, and I think that, you know, I made some big calls here and there, and I think Hayden took some unnecessary risks, but, like, Hayden definitely deserved the first game. He played very well that first game, especially with that lead matchup. I think the second game, I probably, you know, I would say I deserved to lose, but in Pokemon, like, it's not over until it's over, and I was able to at least find a way to win, but I think, like, Hayden definitely had the kind of advantage there in that second game, and I was able to at least pull it back. And game 3 here, it was, even though it looked kind of one-sided since I ended up winning 4-0. I think if Hayden made one big call and was able to double up into a Kartana switch and knock that out, that would have put me in a significantly worse position just because of how good Kartana was against Hayden's entire team. But I do end up beating Hayden 2-1, and that does mean that I end up advancing into the finals. So that's going to be it for this match analysis, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, leave a like if you did and give me any feedback since I'd love to do more of these. Really, the goal is for these is to, 1, allow you guys to watch some high-level tournament play if you haven't seen these sets already, and 2, offer some kind of thinking and give you guys some insight into my mindset when playing these games, because, you know, playing in tournaments is a little bit different than playing on, say, Battle Spot or whatnot. So yeah, that's going to be my match analysis, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Go check out the top 8 match analysis if you have not already. Go check out Road to Ranked if you have not already. The QR code and the team analysis for this team will be posted on Monday. Tomorrow will be the finals analysis, so keep your eyes open for that as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Alright, peace.